Hi everybody, welcome to the second video of the Ultimate Guide series. I'm going to talk about Redstone power and signals and different Redstone components, because when you want to build a note block song you also need to know a little about redstoning, because well, you need to get the redstone signal through your entire song. And I already played a little bit of this song for you, and I'm going to talk about stacking the note blocks together. So what is an efficient way to put all the note blocks together without using too much space, because it would be nice if you make a song in your Minecraft world that you can listen to from one place and you don't have to move around to hear the entire song. I'm going to talk a little bit about cornering, so how you can bend your redstone signal around the corner, just some basics about redstone signals as well. I'm going to talk about observers and rails, how you can use those, and also about vertical redstone signals, so redstone signals up and down. Alright, so the most efficient way of stacking redstone, note blocks together, is, I think, in rows of 3. I've tried many different setups and I like this one the best, because if you put more blocks together in one tick you get all kinds of problems you have to deal with signals spilling over to other rows and stuff like that. And if I need more than 3 note blocks, I just create another row underneath or something. So what you see over here, in this tick I need to play 5 different note blocks, so 3 up here and 2 down there. So how this works is the observer reads the chains I make in the repeater, and the redstone signal just travels through the entire row over here. I just killed that block because that block makes this song loop. So this is how the redstone signals travels through the note blocks, and you have to set the repeaters to a certain amount of delay to get the right rhythm. And I always do this in rows of 3. Well, the reason why I do this is because when I power this block it doesn't interfere with the note blocks in the other row. And it kind of works like this. So when I power this note block, it also powers the 2 blocks next to it. And the power also gets through the note block, so you can see the dust picking up the power from this note block. But you can also do it the other way around, so the dust pushes the power through this note block into the repeater. But as you can see, this one doesn't get powered, so I only get power for these 3 blocks over here. And because of that I can stack the note blocks together, because if I power this one, only the other 2 gets powered and the other row doesn't get powered at all. You cannot put 2 note blocks behind each other like this, because it will just power the blocks but the signal doesn't get through. So you always need to have like a repeater, note block, repeater, etc. If you want to do more than 3 note blocks next to each other, you could just expand the width of your row a bit and put an extra note block over here and put an extra repeater over here, so it would look like something like this. You need to get some power into this repeater as well, and this way I can power another block over there, for example, and I can get 4 notes at the same time. You can also do it like this. Just put a piece of dust in the middle, because the dust will give power to those 4 blocks around it, and those 4 blocks around it will also power the blocks around it. So, but this creates another problem, because the other row of note blocks that's coming over here might suffer some spillover effect from this redstone dust powering the blocks in the other row. So I don't like to use this. I've used this before, but I don't really like that. I rather stick to just 3 note blocks in a row. So when you're powering a note block, make sure you use repeaters and sometimes you can use a combination of redstone dust and repeaters, but you cannot do a setup like this where you get dust into the node block and dust out of the node block, because dust only gives weak power to the node block and it cannot power any dust surrounding the node block. But the repeater will pick up on it. So if I press this button, the repeater gets power, but this redstone dust doesn't. And if I would put a repeater into it like this node block gets strong power, so the dust can pick up the power. So where the spillover of redstone power happens the most is at the edges, because they're the hardest to build. This is kind of obvious how this works, but here you have to think a bit. And well, when you have rows of 3 node blocks like this, it's very easy because they're separated too much for any spillover to happen. So if I push this button, well, it goes nicely. And if you don't need as much delay, you can also remove this and put some dust over there. So it doesn't affect the other row. And you can just, because this one gets powered by the repeater, the dust will pick up on that. And because this one gets powered by the dust, but I put a repeater behind it, it also picks up on the signal going through this block. And when you're doing a corner like this, it's best to build it like this, so you can pick up the signal with the dust and turn it around immediately. It's the most compact way of doing it. You can also do it in different ways, but this is just the best way, I think. But sometimes you don't want to put 3 node blocks in a row, because maybe you don't play as many node blocks at the same time. For example, when you put 2 blocks in a row like this, you need to think a little bit about the spillover of the redstone power, and you have to prevent it, but it's possible. So when I push this button, everything is fine. The redstone dust powers this block, but this one doesn't pick up on it because it's dust, and the repeater does, so the power goes this way again. But when it comes back the other way around, I get a problem if I don't put the dust over here, because both rows gets power. And why is that? Because this redstone dust also powers this block. This piece of redstone dust can't read it, but this repeater can. And I don't want to do that. I don't want this repeater to do that, because I want the signal to go up over here. So if I put an extra little dust over here, you can see the bend in my dust. This piece of dust will not power this block anymore. So everything is fine again. So you need some extra dust over here. So this is also possible, 2 node blocks next to each other. But 1 node block next to each other always gives problems. So that's why I never build a setup like this, because it's just a lot of problems. The first row is fine. I want to press this button. Right, but the second row is going to have problems, because this dust is going to power this one as well. And you can try to do something about it. For example, you can make a target block over there and make it like this, so you get a bend again. No problem. In the third row over here, you get this problem again, and you cannot bend this dust because that's a target block, and it will always point it to a target block. So you have to think of something else. You have to maybe extend the row a little bit further or something like that. But if you build multiple rows behind each other, the problem gets worse and worse, and after a while it just doesn't look very good anymore. So I would always build with 2 node blocks next to each other, or 3, but never with just 1 row. Unless you're using observers. But observers have some advantages, but also some disadvantages, because repeater, you can set the delay in repeater from 1 to 4, and you cannot do that with an observer. So an observer will always have a delay of 1, and if I want to make a higher delay, for example 4, I need to use 4 observers. So it kind of defeats the purpose of making your build as compact as possible, because, well, it's 4 blocks. And that's why I only advise using observers when you want to play a note every tick, or when you have a part of the song where you want to play a note every tick. You can do it partially with observers and the rest of the song with repeaters. But around the corners, around the bends, you need to you can use the rails to make it work, and this is very efficient, because if I tune this block, well, only these 2 get played, and that's because this observer powers this note block, which powers the rail, and this observer will see that, but a powered rail cannot power a what's this called, activated rail. So this one doesn't get bothered by the power from this row, and so you can separate it. So you have to alternate between powered rails and activated rails. So that's for the cornering. And well, if you want to use the observers and the repeaters together, you get some other problems, because those repeaters will make delays that will make the observer read the note block twice, and that's generally not something you want. When you're playing those note blocks, you don't want them to play them 2 times in a row. So what I mean is, if I press this thing over here, this observer reads this note blocks twice because of the delay of this repeater, because it powers the note block. This observer will see the power, it will power this next one and the one over there, but when this note block powers off, it will also see the powering off, and it will give another signal. So I can only use repeaters when I keep the signal short. As when I get a long signal, it messes things up. So when I put it like this, it's fine. When I do 2 ticks, it's still fine, but 3 ticks, it gets a double read from this observer. And because generally you also use repeaters on 3 or 4 ticks, so this gives problems when using observers and repeaters together. And if you want to shorten the pulse from a repeater, because you're going to do a part with observers only, you're going to have to use this device over here. It's a sticky piston. And what's going on over here? These 2 note blocks only get powered once, even if I have a 4 delay repeater over here. And what happens is this repeater will power this sticky piston, which will move the piece of wood up, and because right after this one powers the wood over here, it also powers the note block, and the piston gets activated 1 tick later. It moves the piece of wood up, and it cuts off the power from my repeater. So this note block does get played, but only gets power for a very short time, and this observer will only see the powering on and off once. So it's so fast it doesn't see a change happening twice, and it only gives 1 signal to the next note block. So I use this one a lot for shortening signals, so I can use observers, and I did so as well with my repeating bit over here. This repeater will give a long signal through this block over here, because I use, let's see, I use repeaters with 4 ticks, and because I use 2 observers over here, we want a short signal, so this is my signal shortener. Alright, when you're going to move a signal up or down, because maybe you're stacking your node blocks on top of each other, or you're stacking them next to each other like this, but your song isn't finished when you're over here, you want to move the signal up or down one level, you have to make sure you get some space between your node block and the next layer, so you need one block of air in between, or you cannot hear the node blocks. And when you're moving down, there are some tricks you can use, but I would just advise to use redstone dust, because it's the most simple way of doing it. So when I press this button, it powers both node blocks like that, and it just moves the signal through dust down there. When you're moving up, you can also use this, but you can also do it maybe just a little bit more compact. It really isn't that much more compact actually, but you can use a trick with glass. When you're putting glass on top of redstone dust, it doesn't cut the redstone off. You can see it just goes through the glass kind of, and the signal doesn't get cut off either. So if I press this button, I can still power the top node block on top. It doesn't work the other way around. So if I would power this node block over here, well, I need to power it directly. You can see it doesn't happen when you're trying to move the power down. Alright, so yeah, that's the basics about redstone signals. Thanks for listening, and bye bye.